So it has finally begun. Banks have been lending what I would say to be an irresponsible amount of money to people for a while now. So we're now starting to see regulation come into play to avoid what happened back in the 2007-2008 GFC, which subsequently ruined people's finances and their lives. Welcome back to my channel. My name is Reese, and in today's video, I'm going to be talking about the recent changes that have come into play for lenders and how it will affect someone's ability to borrow money to purchase a home. Context first. APRA, or the Australian Prudential Regulation Authority, is an independent authority that supervises institutions like banks, insurance companies, and superannuation companies. And they were established to regulate these financial institutions to make sure that confidence remains high for the users of these services, by ensuring that Australia's financial interests are protected and by making sure that the financial system remains stable, competitive, and efficient. And the reason why I'm talking about APRA to kick off is because they are the establishment responsible for introducing these new regulations which have come into effect. For Australia in particular, the jump in house prices was heavily influenced by the drop of interest rates, which was escalated by the pandemic. And the outcome of this introduced a new set of buyers into the market. A few examples of these additional buyers would be people who were able to increase their savings rates as a result from being locked at home for extended periods of time over the past 2 years, people who were now no longer traveling and spending their money abroad, people who realized the value in having a big backyard and space at home, especially if they were going to be locked there for long periods of time. And the biggest reason being FOMO. I have to tell you, it has been wild watching people borrow up to their necks when very clearly they were not ready to take on the amounts of debt that they have. I have been seeing this firsthand where people I know who have different types of loans, such as a mortgage, a car loan, maybe some personal loans, are starting to realize that they are unable to fund their lifestyles whilst also supporting the debts they have. And theoretically, this should have been avoided for them through the screening process when they applied for these loans. The math would have very clearly indicated that it would be irresponsible to lend them this money in the first place. So APRA, being the banking regulator for Australia, have now introduced their first steps to attempt to slow down the growth that we have seen in property over the past 24 months. And what they have essentially done is forced banks to be more precautious about how they lend money to people. The focus being on new customers, specifically about how the interest rate assumption calculation is assessed, which is also known as the serviceability buffer. And what this actually means is that banks will now have to calculate a new customer's mortgage repayments at an interest rate that is 3% above what the actual rate will be. And before this new rule came into effect, banks were calculating it at 2.5%. So what this means for borrowers is their borrowing power will take a hit, which is estimated to be around the 5% mark, which might not seem like all that much. However, these changes will definitely still be significant for many. In theory, it should hit the people who are already leveraged to the maximum first, and probably the hardest as well. Theoretically, removing them, which is a good thing because they probably shouldn't be borrowing this money if they are already leveraged to the maximum borrowing power that they possibly can be. The thing to note, however, in my opinion, is that this will still affect the people who are trying to buy a home to live in, as there will probably still be plenty of investors with money and developing power who can outbid and scoop up property, ultimately pricing out these owner-occupiers from the market. Personally, I'm expecting this to have the effect of reducing the number of available buyers for a property, not necessarily the value that the house sells for. So what are my thoughts on these changes? I am welcoming them with open arms. As someone who is currently trying to buy a house and is probably going to have tens of thousands of dollars wiped from my borrowing capacity, I still believe these changes were needed. I have been watching people take on huge amounts of debt over the past few years now with the justification that interest rates are lower than they've ever been, so it's okay for me to borrow this money. Over this period of time as well, I've had conversations with people who could not tell me what their mortgage repayments would be if interest rates were to hit 7% or higher. And although it's highly unlikely that this will happen anytime soon, it's still something that should be considered. The fact that these people aren't even thinking about or considering the worst case scenario just goes to show that they probably shouldn't be being lent this money in the first place. This is why I'm such a strong advocate for people to learn about finance. I truly do believe that there should be some sort of test where people who want to borrow money need to demonstrate their understanding of the commitment that they're about to sign themselves onto. Anyway, I am hoping that this is just the beginning to start to curb the absolute crazy growth we have seen in the market over the past couple of years, I guess time will tell. Especially considering the Commonwealth Bank's chief executive, Matt Combe, said APRA's move was a sensible step for borrowers and banks, and he flagged the possibility that more tightening could be needed. With that being said, I hope you enjoyed today's video. I hope it was insightful. I know it's a bit topical towards Australia, but I think it was an interesting topic nonetheless. If you enjoyed it, please hit that like and subscribe button down below. I really do appreciate the support and it really does help the channel grow. And I'll leave you there. As always, have a good day, have a good week, and I will see you in the next one. Bye for now.